Today on Locked On Rockies, when would you make moves if you were the Colorado Rockies? And how would you rate the Rockies' moves so far this year?
You are Locked On Rockies, your daily Colorado Rockies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Rock On Rockies fans, welcome into the Locked On Rockies podcast for today, the 21st day of June in the year 2024. I am your host of the Locked On Rockies podcast, joined by the ones, the onlys, Evan Lang and Skyler Timmins of Purple Row and a bunch of other places. We'll dive into all that in great introductions and more here in just a moment. We're going to be playing GM today, and we're going to be talking all things Rockies baseball. But before we dive into all the action, today's episode is brought to you by Tax Network USA. Tax Network, did you know that it's never too late to resolve your tax issues with the IRS? Don't wait. Reduce your tax debt and get help from a team of licensed tax professionals. Call 1-800-549-1000 or visit tnusa.com/locked-on. We are recording a little ahead of time here in the middle of the Dodgers-Rockies series, as who just hit a home run off of Austin Gomber there?
Known old lady abuser, Andy Pajes.
Well, there you go. Another a Dodger I've barely heard of doing damage to the Rockies. Why is it that every time the Dodgers hit the ball, I just get a sense of dread? Because, man, I mean, Gomber just being totally honest, he navigates a good first inning, but, man, it seems like every time they hit the ball, it's going to the warning track and all that stuff. The Dodgers, such a machine, man.
Those nerds know what they're doing for the Dodgers.
It's almost like analytics and player development are important and the key to winning baseball games.
Especially when you think that the Rockies are currently playing what would you call this? The B team, right? At best, the B team of the Dodgers with the injuries that they've sustained. And we know if Mookie Betts was playing in this series, he would have batted probably close to 1,000 with does the damage. But I'm just curious. I've kind of asked a couple of our guests this week this similar question. When you watch the Dodgers and when you watch the Rockies play the Dodgers, what type of differences do you notice? Is it the behind the scenes stuff that's on full display? For me, my big takeaway so far in this series has been I envy the Dodgers' plate discipline and approach at the dish. Like, if the Rockies could take that same philosophy, I feel like they'd be in such great positions. The Rockies have been brutalized by 2 out runs in the last 2 series now. I'm just curious, is there anything that jumps out to you both when you watch the Rockies play the Dodgers and when you compare these two teams?
For me, it's the scouting and analytics. I said it on Twitter the first game of the series against James Paxton, but they looked the Rockies hitting core outside of when Jacob Stallings hit that solo home run looked completely helpless against a 35-year-old pitcher who's been in the league for quite some time and who's rebounding well with the Dodgers after a bunch of injury-plagued seasons, but had not really had a particularly good performance in the last few weeks. And he struck out 8 batters, and they looked helpless against him. I said something to the effect of, it's like the Rockies didn't scout for this game and instead said, we'll figure it out as we go along. And that's the thing. Meanwhile, they really had, and I don't want to denigrate Cal Quantrill because he had a gutsy start during that game where he, despite them really kind of having his number, kept the Rockies in that game with only giving up 3 earned runs. But it's clear that they had, good scouting and good approach when it came to especially 2 outs and 2 strike counts.
Mm-hmm. And kind of something that you alluded to is Andy Pajes. Those kind of no-name guys you've never heard of are doing stuff against the Rockies. It's how the Dodgers are able to go about developing players, and it seems like, they have Mookie Betts on the IL. They have Yoshinobu Yamamoto. They always have somebody who can step up and hits really well against whoever it is, but especially the Rockies. They are just a very pesky team. If there's ever a series I straight up dread ever watching and I kind of go out of my way, I'm like, I'm not going to watch. It's usually when the Rockies are playing the Dodgers. because they're just such an annoying, frustrating team to watch because they do everything right. No, they're a good baseball team, a good organization, and it's just night and day when you watch them play the Rockies. Just differences in approaches and how they do everything, going about their business. Differences are big, and it's very frustrating as a fan.
And it's that depth too. There really always is somebody goes down, another guy comes up. With Mookie Betts on the IL, they called it Miguel Rojas, who had like a 4-for-4 night
Right.
the first game of the series. There's always somebody ready to step up versus the Rockies right now with all the injuries they've had. Their depth is being tested, and they don't really have it.
Yeah, and it's kind of guys that are being given some chances now and opportunities to step up that aren't doing much. And it's again, it's just the next guy up that's available for the Dodgers is almost better than 85% of the Rockies lineup. I mean, when you really think about that, the fact that, I mean, and we can dive into this too. The Rockies, in the wake of injuries and how things have shaken out with a couple of the young guys getting hurt too, is now Jake Cave has somehow found his way into the lineup just about every single day. And it's like, I don't know, again, it's not that Jake Cave is going to knock your socks off, because he, when you really break it down, it's not like he's doing all sorts of this stuff. And people listening to the show are probably going to think I got this Jake Cave vendetta. And it's like, he's the CJ Crone of this year. He's just another veteran guy that doesn't do enough game-breaking stuff for me outside of, I guess, the one play a game or whatever that makes Bud Black just like, oh, my guy. And and then though, when these guys get a chance, I'm watching. I got the game going while we're recording right now. Michael Tolley is batting 186. Nolan Jones is batting 198. Hunter Goodman's batting 192. Alan Trejo's batting 135. Jake Cave is batting 254. I mean, these guys they're not up to snuff when it comes to when you got to take on a team like the Dodgers. So the development stuff is like, seems like it's on full display, because I am a little disappointed with how some of these players are panning out this year. I think the Rockies are seeing some tough regression. Nolan Jones has the injury stuff, but again, I'm still waiting for the Montero breakout. Like, I don't know if you guys feel the same type of way. Where are your heads at when it comes to the roster and who do you think deserves the playing time and the performances of some of these kind of teeter-totter players this year?
So for Michael Toglia and for Nolan Jones, you point out that their batting averages are pretty lackluster right now, but a huge thing to keep in mind for the listeners is that these guys are both working on pulling their averages back up after, not playing a ton. Michael Toglia really played for only the first month with the Rockies. Same for Nolan Jones. And yeah, both of their performances were not great, but then Nolan Jones is shelved for over a month. Toglia gets called back up, and they've actually both been performing a lot better. Nolan Jones, especially, taking a lot of walks and making good contact. So for them, I'm honestly not too worried. It's the numbers deceive you. For Monty, though, it's just how much longer can this mix of not putting up the numbers and bad ball luck continue? Because it really feels like every time he makes solid contact with the ball, it's going straight into the glove of a defender. But at the same time, it's been long enough where that should have already started to sort of even itself out, especially because finally, after years of begging, he's getting consistent playing time, but it's just not putting the numbers up that we would need him to put for him to be a regular starter. And I do think it's, development wise, the Rockies messed that up by, the previous two seasons, having him just constantly up and down and not getting consistent playing time at a big league level.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I go back to too, with a lot of these guys, and to draw that comparison with the Dodgers don't settle on their roster. When guys are really struggling, they're like, okay, we're going to bring in somebody else. You're going to maybe go down to AAA. You're going to go work on stuff. But we've got this other prospect we'll bring up and see what he can do. And kind of flip-flopping guys around. Like James Outman was a third place finisher in the Rookie of the Year. He's down in AAA because he struggled so much. And they're like, okay, go down there and we'll bring up somebody else. And Andy Pajes now is doing a bunch of stuff. So it's the Rockies are giving guys chances. they never know when to like stop giving guys chances. A Jake Cave, for instance. Yeah, this veteran, he's getting a lot of opportunities, mostly out of necessity because he's a warm body who can play. And like he does his stuff. He's a good outfielder. He's a good defender, can make some hits, really not the thump you want in a lineup. But for these younger guys, especially Montero, you're just not seeing the results. And so at what point can the Rockies really admit, like, okay, this isn't working out? We're going to make some decisions. Sorry, Monty, you're done. Tolia, you're our guy at first base because we're starting to see some improvement from you. Hunter Goodman is going to get more opportunities to catch and other things. So it's figuring out guys and just giving them opportunities and sticking with them and then making a decision finally. And so they have a hard time doing either of those. They'll do one or the other. Never like, okay, we'll see what they can do. Okay, we've seen enough. We're done.
Well, they're kind of forced into a situation where Montero and Tolia have to play. So, I mean, either one of them you're going to have to stick with consistently, with Chris Bryant being, I mean, let's just chalk it up to another month lost. I mean, let's just throw it there in terms of the question mark on the time. When I see no timetable, then all right, I am saying post All-Star break. Maybe him and Herman are going to come back at the same time at this point. But it's just a matter of the question too, where it's these guys are getting an opportunity and a chance here to when they do get that chance. The consistency is always the biggest problem, but it's just I'm not necessarily fully confident in the Rockies getting the most out of these players, and we're actually keeping our eyes on it. And this news will be well developed here. And another wrinkle that might be something the Rockies have to consider is Charlie Blackmon has been removed from game number 2 here of against the Dodgers. So by the time you're listening to this, that news will be already discussed and figured out. And you know what's a great place to find out all the information about Charlie Blackmon's injury? Purple Row, and where Evan Lang and Skyler Timmins do all their work, where they can cover a lot more. I didn't let you guys have the that intro. We'll do that when we come back from the break, and we'll also put our GM hats on because we talked philosophy. Now let's put Skyler and Evan in the driver's seat as we just commentator jinxed it, folks. We did it. Montero hit the 2-run bomb as we were just talking about him on the pod as well. It's kind of fun to record this. I know it'd be a little glimpse back into game 2 here for folks, but exactly what we're looking for from the Rockies when it comes to Montero right there. That's the Montero we need.
Yeah, you got to hit those bombs. And Alan Trejo's single before that, by the way. So
there it is, folks. Right? You know, it's possible. And the Rockies have put up 6 in the first 2 innings. It shows that there is pulse and life to this Rockies team. Let's talk about it some more here coming up in segment number 2 of today's episode of Locked On Rockies. Before we do that, though, got to tell you about the folks that help make this show possible, and that includes Stitch Fix. You know that instant confidence boost you get from an outfit that makes you look really good. That's what you get with Stitch Fix. With Stitch Fix, you get a stylist who understands your style, size, and budget. They do all the shopping for you. It's the easiest way to update your wardrobe this season. It's so helpful to have someone that understands what you're looking for and what you need, because I'm not really the most knowledgeable clothes shopper. So it's nice to have someone that I can say what I like, what I'm looking for, and they handle it for you. Your stylist always sends just the right pieces, and the fit is on point. You can see it all for yourself at Stitch Fix, because it's style that makes you feel as good as you look. Now's the best time to get started at stitchfix.com/MLB and get $100 off. That's $25 off your first 4 fixes for a limited time only. That's stitchfix.com/MLB for $100 off. Stitchfix.com/MLB. Must redeem within 7 days of sign up. Offer does not include kids fixes. Folks, this is the Locked On Rockies podcast. We are free and streaming on your favorite streaming services, and thanking you for making us your first listen of the day. We are joined by special guests Evan Lang and Skyler Timmins. Folks, 2 of the best in the business. They're keeping things locked and loaded over at Purple Row and elsewhere. Let's get the rigmarole here, folks. Where should they go to find all the great content that you all create?
You can find us over at purplerow.com, and then you can find the Affected by Altitude podcast, part of Rocky Mountain Rooftop on your favorite podcasting platforms, and here on YouTube as well. And then you can also find us doing some stuff over at fansfirstsports.com.
That's when you guys dive into a little some, usually Rockies, but outside the Rockies too. So if you're getting some even more baseball takes here. Well, we are playing Rockies GM now. So we're talking about development. We're talking philosophy. Let's put ourselves in the seats of the Rockies here. And Evan, I'll start with you. What moves would you make, and when is the right move for the Rockies? Can the Rockies start making moves now? And should have, like, for example, if Elias Diaz didn't get hurt, should the Rockies have moved him right now when the rumor mill is a buzzing, or do the Rockies need to wait until the trade deadline to make something happen?
Yeah, so you asked me before the break to put on my GM hat, so that's exactly what I did. And yes, the Rockies honestly should have probably already been making trades. The market for catchers has been a buzz since really the beginning of the season because a lot of catchers have gone down with injuries. The Mets lost Francisco Alvarez for a little bit, and right now the Phillies just lost JT Realmuto. There are a bunch of other teams that are very catcher hungry, and I love Elias Diaz. I'll say that for free. I really have grown to love him a great deal since he came to this team, but his value is never going to be, well, it's never going to be higher than when after he won the All-Star Game MVP, but it's never going to be higher after that than it is right now. Even with the injury, because they know that it's just a calf strain. It's not necessarily going to affect his catching or hitting per se. Honestly, the time to make a move is whenever you feel like you've got the best deal. You do not have to wait for the trade deadline to do so. And there's just a bunch of moves that the Rockies need to be making, so you might as well start.
Skyler?
Yeah, I know it's unfortunate that he strained his calf and that he is out, because I think for those same points Evan's talked about, catchers are a premium. Teams need good catchers. They're hard to come by. And Elias Diaz is about as good as they come on both sides of the ball. He's a little bit more heavier on the offensive side, but he's still a pretty decent catcher behind the dish. And when you look at the All-Star voting update that they had recently, he's 8th among National League catchers out of nowhere, which is pretty nice for a guy like him. And so, and I think catchers also have that added value now with the DH spot. So he doesn't always have to be catching if you need a supplemental offensive bat in general who can also catch. I think that makes catchers a lot more premium, and especially with Diaz on the 1-year deal or the final year of his contract. You've got Hunter Goodman, who you could give more opportunities to. I think Jacob Stallings being as good as he's been on both sides of the ball this year makes Diaz even more, helps them feel more comfortable. Like, yeah, we can trade him because we've got guys right now that can fill in for him. And we have Drew Romo, who's getting closer and closer. So once he's back off the IL, give him a couple of games, make sure he's good. And then, strike while the iron's hot when you can.
I mean, honestly, I would even be fielding offers on Jacob Stallings at this point, whose offensive value has literally never been better in his entire career than it is right now.
Is that a course? Would people be coursing that for most likely in negotiations there?
I mean, probably, but
no, he went and saw an eye doctor. He got some he worked on his vision.
Is that interesting?
I'm pulling up his splits right now to see the home road splits because they're going to be wacky.
And I will
surprisingly, Jacob Stallings has been a much better hitter on the road. 909 OPS away from Coors Field, 808 at home. Away from Coors Field, 4 doubles, 2 home runs, and 11 runs batted in.
Wow. There you go. That's baseball sometimes.
Don't Coors it away.
My thing with Stallings, and I think the Rockies would be more hesitant or more likely to hold on to him. One, because he's a veteran. We know how the Rockies love veterans. But also, mutual options hardly ever get exercised on both ends. But he does have that option type of scenario where he can be with the Rockies for next season. And he perfectly good mentor. Now, a lot of teams like to have a backup catcher who can act as a mentor for their other catcher before that catcher's ready to take over full time. And so he would be the perfect mentor for Hunter Goodman or Drew Romo, whichever the Rockies decide to do next year. So I could see a world where I'm going to hold on to Stallings just to help work through this year, bring him back again for one more year to kind of mold the next guy.
Just put Jake Cave behind the backstop. He'll be fine. He's got that veteranosity. But
Yeah.
that does make sense because if you trade Diaz, I think you trade one of them regardless.
Right.
One of these guys will be gone.
Yeah.
If they do not trade Diaz, I can see them signing him to a 1 or 2 year extension to continue to be that mentor role, because it is true, like you said, basically all three of the catchers immediately behind Diaz and Stallings either are a rookie in Hunter Goodman or will be rookies in Drew Romo and Willie McIver. So, and I mentioned Willie McIver just because he's having a very good season in AAA Albuquerque this year. But yeah, I feel like you're right in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, I love Elias Diaz too, but it makes sense. I think I'm sure he's really enjoyed the Rockies and he's etched his way into my Rockies lore. I mean, the All-Star Game MVP will always be something cool, and he's definitely going to be a player that will be a fun what-if player to, if you had Elias Diaz on the playoff teams a couple years ago, what does that do to the teams and things like that? But you got to make that move, and I think some other moves too might be interesting. More people are saying Cal Quantrill might get traded, which I guess would be interested. I thought it might be the Rockies would be looking into bringing him back. But with Kyle Freeland and German Marquez coming back for the second half of the season, you could explore going in that direction, especially where I don't know how much Cal Quantrill is going to want to sign up for to continue to stay in Colorado. And but so let's a couple of for sure knows, right? Charlie Blackmon ain't going anywhere, and Ryan. I mean, people are saying there's rumors, but I'll believe a Ryan McMahon trade when I see it, right? And another thing too. How do you feel about Bob Nightingale? And I know who's saying it, but saying for sure the Rockies are going to make a trade, because it's like, again, yes, the Rockies should move Elias Diaz. Am I 110% guaranteeing that it's going to happen? No.
Yeah, for Bob Nightingale reporting that the Rockies will for sure trade Elias Diaz, one, you've got to consider the source, and two, that report is absolutely meaningless in the absence of a trade, because until the trade actually happens, there is no such thing as they absolutely will trade this player. We've been down that road before with many different Rockies over the years. They're absolutely going to trade Trevor Story or do something like that. I'll believe it when I see it. Ryan McMahon also, lots of people are saying, lots of teams want Ryan McMahon. Patrick Saunders basically put the nail in the coffin on that today, at time of recording, where he was like, the Rockies have no intention of trading Ryan McMahon whatsoever. So unless somebody really knocks their socks off with a deal, and how it is with the Rockies, where they greatly overvalue their players and other teams greatly undervalue Rockies, I don't think they would ever get a deal they would consider satisfactory for that. In terms of pitching, Dakota Hudson, I think, is the probably going to be the first man on the trade block. He's actually put up some pretty good starts on the road, where I'm willing to bet teams are going to go, this guy is going to put up good numbers away from Coors Field. If we can take him out of Colorado, we've got a perfectly cromulent back end starter, a long reliever. And then for Cal, I would legitimately like to see him stay, but the question of keeping him is then, do you think you would be able to sign him to an extension? Do you think he would want to stay in Colorado after team control ends next year? That kind of thing. Because if there's no chance that he stays in Colorado after the end of next season, you trade him. That's a no-brainer. But if you can convince him to stay, then you keep him around.
And that's what I wrote about for my Wednesday rock pile over at purpleroad.com. With the space-time continuum, so it'll be out by the time already been out by the time you hear this. But that was my thing of like, it's not the worst thing in the world if they keep him, because he has that 1 year of control. Arbitration probably would be due like $8 to $10 million in arbitration. So not a bad deal for a guy that's putting in a very solid year. And I believe it was on this show that I made the hot take that he would have a sub-4 ERA. We're going strong on that, Paul. But it also, that's what makes him valuable as a trade chip, because he is doing pretty well. No, he's not what he was, but he's pretty resurgent this year, a really good year. That makes him valuable with that extra year of control that teams would maybe be willing to chip in a little more for him. Oh, here's a big league ready starter that you can have or something like that. So it could go either way, but beyond that arbitration year, I don't know if Cal Quantrill want to stick around. It's kind of like a Jason Marquis situation. Really good year after he got traded to the Rockies, declined an extension offer from the Rockies, and then he went and signed with the Nationals. So we'll see what happens with old Quantrill, but he could go either way. But I would lean toward I'm going to trade him.
And it's tough for Cal because I do think how he's performed, especially at Coors Field this year, where he's been pretty solid, increases his value exponentially. Because you have the fact that he has performed well in countless gutsy Coors Field starts, and he's shown a very strong mental game when it comes to pitching here at Coors Field. There's never any excuses. He never really seems to get in his own head, as it were, as plenty of pitchers do. But, you listen to his post-game interviews and there's a lot of, well, I had to figure it out because that's my job. And the fact that he's, in 6 starts at Coors Field, got a 3.97 ERA with, 25 strikeouts, and he's only given up 5 home runs, he that ups his value.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and it also kind of is that thing of, if you do keep him, what type of extension, how long? I mean, again, the Senza contract, the Freeland contract, those are kind of, and the lack of getting a contract done with John Gray, all kind of things that remind you and play a factor into this. There's one guy we haven't talked about, and he's been my trade rumor guy that I've been talking about, and it relates to an aggressive call up here for the Rockies. So I want to ask you about that move and a following move, if that about second base, coming up here in segment number 3. Before we do that, though, got to tell you about the folks that help make this show possible, and that includes Tax Network USA. Here on Locked On Rockies, we pride ourselves on getting you the latest news for your team, whether it's the offseason, the draft, spring training, or the playoffs. It's year-round. You know what else is year-round? Collection season. Just because tax season is over doesn't mean the IRS will stop coming after you for unfiled taxes. The IRS can garnish your wages, levy your bank accounts, and even seize your property. Don't let the IRS target you. Let the licensed professionals and tax experts at Tax Network USA go to bat for you. With over 14 years of experience and an A+ rating by the Better Business Bureau, Tax Network USA has saved their clients over $1 billion in tax debt. Whether you owe taxes, have complicated matters that require tax planning, or finally hit that parlay this season and need help correctly filing, call 1-800-549-1000 or visit tnusa.com/lockedon. See the link in this episode description below. This is the Locked On Rockies podcast. We're joined by special guests Evan Lang and Skyler Timmins. You can find them on Purple Row and Affected by Altitude. All some great Rockies content and more on the great interwebs here. We are winding things down here, so we don't have a ton of time, but I do want to bring up one trade and a move, and I also want to get your one move the Rockies got to do outside of Elias Diaz. And that might be a call-up, that might be a promotion, that might be as someone starts. But for me, I think the Rockies got to make a decision on Brendan Rodgers, and I think they need to do it now. I think that if he comes back from the injury and he's playing well, I think you really have to look into that, because I think there are teams that'll be interested in him, and he has Trevor's story written all over him. I don't see him staying after his team control ends. I don't see him wanting to stay around. I feel like he probably feels like a fresh start might help him, mixed with frustrations of the failing to meet the expectations that he had here. Trevor's story, I think, got to build that reputation as he was able to see success at the major league level, whereas Brendan Rodgers from the get-go has had a reputation around him. So that's really a move I think the Rockies really need to consider, because if you're going to be okay with calling up Amador, mixed in with the fact that you're okay with playing Tovar all last season, I don't think it's really that crazy to think that the Rockies, if they move Brendan Rodgers, would turn to Amador for the rest of the season after the trade deadline.
Yeah, he could be one of, or at least after the season, during the off season, in the kind of a cost-cutting move. And same situation, Cal Quantrill, Guardians dropped him off and then made a quick, simple trade. You're probably not going to get a whole lot for him, maybe. Maybe get something good. But yeah, I agree with you, Paul.
Yeah, for Rodgers, it really is. And, with Trevor's story, he was sort of able to live up to those expectations and sort of chart his own career, but, things haven't really worked out for him since leaving the Rockies just due to injuries. For Rodgers, he's never really been able to live up to the hype of his draft pedigree and how high he was rated as a prospect, because he's just been so hurt all the time. And unfortunately, I actually think that's going to hurt him when it comes to the free agent market, because I do agree that he's going to want a fresh start, but I don't think he's going to be able to find what he's looking for unless he can put together like back-to-back healthy seasons. And so far, he's really not been able to do that. You know, the one year where, you know, he won his Gold Glove and had a truly healthy season, you know, it's hard to forget that he hit 0.47 in the month of April and, you know, really struggled. And I like Brendan Rodgers a lot. I think he's a great defender and I love watching him play. But if he comes back from the injured list and is playing well, you take whatever you can get for him. You know, best offer available, obviously. But with how deep this team is when it comes to middle infielders, you know, that's a no-brainer move, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you know, again, Brendan Rodgers is a guy to root for and fits the Rockies mantra to a T. A great infield defender with a flowing mullet that can hit bombs. I mean, everything that we've loved in Rockies greats. He's got it, but unfortunately, that health is a problem. And I think it is a moment where he might just say and it's not going to be the Rockies' fault or anything necessarily. He just might just say, my luck, the vibes are off. You know, my luck is bad. It's this or that. It'll be better for me to just try it. But I think you nailed it there, Evan. I mean, I don't think the free agent market's going to be kind to him, especially because I think Trevor Story might have been canary in the coal mine situation for teams that might be like, here's a Rockies player that had success, but that injury history, that might be a similar situation where that is. So I feel, but I think people will see the Gold Glove and see the possibilities. But it is really weird that 2 seasons in a row for Brendan Rodgers actually playing with last year's the injury, but where the beginning of the season non-existent. I mean, if he follows the same path and he's one of the best hitters in baseball to finish the season, it's going to be really, really weird. And so I just think that really should at least get the Rockies thinking, because I see why they want to build around Ryan McMahon, even though I do think the argument of trading Ryan McMahon is a solid one still, because we've seen a lot of Ryan McMahon. We know, and he's already shown it in June. Great time. And then in June, nothing. I mean, we get the Ryan McMahon dip. So if a team does want to buy high on a Ryan McMahon, I think you got to be entertaining that too, especially because really when it's breaking down, 2025 ain't going to be that great either. 2026 might be when things get interesting. So stock up, because, man, if you get some MLB ready arms to come up with Dollander, that could be really interesting when you're talking about a new look pitching staff to mix in with the Tovar hitting his prime, Doyle and Jones, reaching veteran status. There are some threads and some storylines, but real quick here, guys, as we only got a couple of minutes left, what is the one move the Rockies got to make here? And one thing the Rockies got to do this season, if it's whether it be trade, a promotion, what is it? If you, so you'll think that the Rockies are in the right spot.
I think for me, it's figure out right field, because you've got Jones in left, you got Doyle in center. Is Jordan Beck going to stick as your everyday outfielder in right field when he comes back from injury sometime soon, like end of this month or early July? Is he going to be in there every day, and how is he going to develop? And committing to him, because once you figure out right field, I think then that's going to kick off a lot of figuring out other things of, okay, what are we doing with Montero, Goodman, Bouchard, whoever else is in there, Jake Cave, ton of guys, but Tolia. Figure out right field, because then you figure that out, I think it's going to solidify your outfield and then really force them to start doing some other things with some of those guys we've talked about.
I'll build off a little bit on that, because this is something that's going to be really important with figuring out with right field. You cannot have Jake Cave still on this team after the trade deadline. I said this last year with both Jurickson Profar and Harold Castro. You just can't. And this is not a denigration against Jake Cave as the person, but Jake Cave is a known quantity. And like Skyler said, right field and even left field to an extent, if Nolan Jones can't turn things on, is something you've got to figure out. And you've got a lot of young guys who are ready or getting ready for big league playing time. There's still a chance we see Zach Veen at the end of this season. there's still a chance that we see other, outfielders in the Rockies organization come up. Benny Montgomery, unfortunately, not going to play this season. But there's an outside chance you maybe see Yanquiel Fernandez, who is a right fielder. There's a lot of decisions to make when it comes to this team. And Jake Cave, I know this team values him for his leadership. He's awesome in the clubhouse. All of the members of the Purple Row team who have been in the clubhouse with him say he is fantastic and just an absolute delight. But you cannot continue to have him start almost every game, play in almost every game. It's not sustainable, and it's a detriment to the development of young players.
Yeah, especially as on the Rockies broadcast, they're highlighting Greg Jones right now, another name we haven't talked about as a guy that would be a factor in that right field for sure. All right, Purple Row, affected by altitude. That's just one of the couple of places you can find Evan and Skyler. Thank you both so much for your time. One last time, give them the pitch so they know where to go.
You can find Rocky Mountain Rooftop, the home of Affected by Altitude, on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. That's at Rocky Mountain Rooftop, at ROCKYMTN Rooftop.
Folks, go check them out there because this one might be a little bit of a time warp. So if you want your up-to-date Rockies coverage to the minute, to the T, Purple Row's got you covered. We got you covered here with Rockies Podcast here on the Locked On Rockies Podcast. But, folks, I'll see you after a week because I got to go get married. So I will see you all after I go do that kind of important thing. But, folks, until then, this is Paul Holden saying so long from the Locked On Rockies Podcast.